Earth was a shattered husk, a once thriving cradle of humanity now reduced to a war-torn battlefield. For years, the Zuhar had descended like locusts, a powerful, relentless alien race that consumed entire worlds, rewriting their histories as if they never existed. On Earth, only pockets of resistance remained. Humanity's last fleets, last strongholds, and last hope. The pride of humanity, a ship that carried the remnants of Earth's military might, was the final line of defense. Captain Maya Voss stood at the bridge, watching as the Zuhar's invasion force loomed in orbit above. Their ships were vast, intimidating, dark metal hulks that seemed to block out the stars themselves. The pride of humanity was small in comparison, its hull battered from previous skirmishes, its engines barely keeping it afloat. Maya's hands gripped the edge of her command chair as she scanned the readouts. Her fleet had been decimated, their allies scattered across the stars. "We can't hold them off much longer," her first officer, Lieutenant Alexei, said gravely. His face was haggard, eyes bloodshot from days without sleep. "We're down to less than 10% of our combat strength." Maya didn't reply immediately. Instead, she stared at the view of Earth below. The once blue planet was now a storm of chaos. Cities were burning, the remnants of human life scattered in the wild, trying to fight back against the inevitable. The Zuhar had come, and their grip was tightening. Humanity had fought with every last ounce of strength, but it wasn't enough. Suddenly, her eyes fell on something unusual, an ancient relic buried under layers of dust on the navigation console. It had been handed to her by an unknown benefactor just days before the invasion began. At first, Maya thought it was just another artifact, perhaps a symbol of Earth's past. But as she touched it now, it hummed with an unfamiliar energy, warmth, almost as if it had been waiting for her. Maya turned it over, revealing a series of intricate symbols, none of which she recognized. They weren't from any known language, and yet the patterns seemed to stir something within her. An instinct, a sense of urgency. She placed it back on the console, trying to shake off the feeling that it was calling to her. "Captain, we've received a message," Alexei interrupted, pulling her from her thoughts. "It's from one of our last remaining colonies in the belt. They're under attack." Maya nodded, torn. Another front to defend. Earth was crumbling, but they had to hold on. Before she could respond, a pulse of light flared on the console, sending a wave of shock through her body. The relic shifted and twisted, as if alive. The symbols glowed briefly before fading, leaving behind an overwhelming sense of something. Someone reaching out. Her heart raced, a deep primal feeling that she couldn't explain. "Captain," Alexei repeated, voice edged with concern. "Are you all right?" Maya's fingers brushed the relic again. This time, a flood of visions washed over her, flickers of other places, other times. The chaos of war, faces of warriors long forgotten. The strange feeling deepened until she heard a voice, faint but clear, whispering directly into her mind. "The eternal champion will rise again." Her breath caught in her throat. She slammed the relic back onto the console. The voice had gone, but its weight lingered. She turned toward her officers, set course for the belt. "Now, we're not giving up." But as she stood there, a small part of her knew that this wasn't just another fight. Something had changed, something inside her, something ancient. She couldn't explain it, but she understood. Earth's last hope wasn't in the hands of its remaining soldiers. It was something far older, far more powerful. The eternal champion, whoever or whatever that was, had just awoken. The pride of humanity lurched as its engines roared to life, and Maya's command room plunged into a new kind of chaos. The ship's sensors blared with alarms, and the crew scrambled to their stations. But amidst the cacophony, something strange was happening. The relic, still nestled on the console, pulsed with an unnatural light, filling the room with an eerie glow. Maya reached out, her fingers brushing the surface again. The moment she touched it, the world seemed to unravel. A violent shockwave of energy surged through her body, sending her crashing to the ground. The walls of the bridge flickered in and out of existence, like a broken hologram. Time itself seemed to bend and twist, distorting reality. "Captain," Alexei screamed, trying to reach her, but his voice was swallowed by a deafening roar. The air grew thick with static, and the ground trembled as if the very fabric of the universe was tearing apart. Then, just as quickly as it started, the chaos ceased. Maya opened her eyes to find herself somewhere different. Gone were the cold, metallic walls of the pride of humanity. Instead, she stood in a dense, misty forest, the air thick with the scent of ancient trees and damp earth. In the distance, she could hear the sounds of battle, clashing swords, the screams of men and alien beasts alike. But there was no sky above her, no stars, no ships, just a world suspended in time. She staggered to her feet, heart pounding. This was not the belt. This was not Earth. A rustling sound came from behind her. Maya turned to see a figure emerging from the shadows. Tall, broad-shouldered, and adorned in ancient armor, the figure moved with the grace of a warrior. His face was weathered and scarred, but his eyes burned with an intensity that seemed out of place in the midst of such an ancient world. "You're not supposed to be here," the man said, his voice low but commanding. "This place is not for you." Maya's breath hitched as she realized what he meant. She was no longer in her time. The relic had somehow sent her far into Earth's past, or was it future? Everything felt wrong. Time seemed to fold in on itself. "I don't understand," Maya stammered. "Where am I? What is this place?" The man's gaze softened, and he stepped closer, his hand resting on the hilt of a sword sheathed at his side. "You are standing in the shadow of humanity's greatest battle, the time of the first eternal champion." "Eternal champion," Maya repeated, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. The relic, the voice, it was all connected. The puzzle pieces were falling into place, but they didn't make sense. "What does this have to do with me?" The man studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "You are the one who will rise. You, like the others before you, will face the Zuhar and protect this world. This is your inheritance, Captain Voss." Maya's stomach twisted as the words sank in. This was no coincidence. The relic had chosen her for a reason, but she still couldn't fathom why. "The Zuhar," she whispered, almost to herself. The alien race that had ravaged Earth's colonies. The invaders who threatened to erase humanity's legacy. "You mean they've been here this whole time?" The man nodded gravely. "They have always been here, twisting time and manipulating history. They were here before you were born. They will be here after you're gone. The eternal champion's duty is to stop them, to preserve humanity's future, no matter the cost." Before Maya could respond, the ground trembled beneath their feet. A booming noise echoed in the distance, and the sound of clashing weapons grew louder. The man drew his sword, his posture tense. "It's time," he said, his voice steady. "They are coming." Maya's heart raced. She barely had time to process the enormity of what was happening before the world around her shifted again. The air grew colder, and the mist thickened as dark shapes began to emerge from the trees. A battle was about to begin, one that would shape the course of history, and in the middle of it stood Maya, humanity's last hope, thrust into a war that had spanned across time. The eternal champion had awoken, and now she had to learn what it meant to become that champion. Maya's hand gripped the hilt of a sword the ancient warrior had thrust into her grasp. The weapon was unlike anything she'd ever seen before, its blade shimmering with an ethereal glow, like it was forged from the very fabric of time itself. The warrior, whose name she still hadn't learned, led her through the thick, foggy forest toward the sounds of battle. Her heart pounded in her chest, but with every step, she could feel the weight of destiny pressing down on her. The war had already begun. As they neared a clearing, the air grew thick with the sounds of clashing metal and guttural alien roars. Maya could see flashes of movement. Humanoid soldiers, Earth's defenders, locked in desperate combat with the Zuhar's monstrous minions. These were the earliest records of the Zuhar, brutal warriors from beyond the stars, with bodies that seemed part insect and part machine. Their presence was like a disease, slowly spreading and corrupting everything they touched. But the scene before her wasn't just an ordinary battle, it was chaos. The warriors of Earth fought valiantly, but something was wrong. The lines were broken, the formation scattered. A sudden realization struck Maya. The battle was being undermined from within. The strategy had been betrayed. She turned to the warrior at her side. "What's happening? Why are they so disorganized?" His face hardened. "The champion's inner circle is fractured. There are those who believe that Earth cannot win this war. They would rather see the Zuhar succeed than continue the fight." Maya's stomach turned. "There's a traitor." He nodded. "Yes. One of the champions who fought alongside the first eternal champion. The ones chosen to protect humanity. He is the one who has turned against us." As if on cue, a figure emerged from the shadows at the edge of the battlefield. Cloaked in dark armor, the man's presence exuded an aura of cold malevolence. His eyes gleamed with a cruel intensity, and the moment he stepped forward, Earth's warriors hesitated, as if his very being had the power to sow doubt in their hearts. "The traitor," Maya whispered, her pulse quickening. The man raised his hand, and a wave of energy rippled across the battlefield, freezing the soldiers in their tracks. The Zuhar, sensing an opportunity, surged forward, their weapons tearing through Earth's defenses with frightening precision. "No!" Maya shouted, charging forward with the ancient sword raised high. But the warrior beside her stopped her, his grip firm. "You cannot fight him yet," he warned. "He is the reason the battle is lost. You must first understand why he betrayed us." Maya pulled away from him, frustration building in her chest. Why would anyone betray humanity? Why fight alongside the Zuhar? The warrior's eyes darkened. The Zuhar promised him something: immortality, a place by their side, untouched by time's passing. The first champion was his mentor, but even the best men can be led astray by the allure of power. Maya looked back at the traitor, who was now directing the Zuhar forces with cold, calculating efficiency. His eyes locked onto hers, and she felt a strange jolt of recognition, a fleeting memory that didn't belong to her. "You're part of this story," she said, her voice low, almost in disbelief. "You've been here before, haven't you?" The warrior beside her stiffened. "You must not focus on him now. The betrayal runs deeper than you realize. He was once like you, chosen to lead humanity, but he believed that if he couldn't defeat the Zuhar, he could at least control them." Maya's mind reeled with the implications of his words. A champion, one who had once fought for Earth's survival, had fallen into darkness, just as she had been thrust into the same battle. It was a pattern, a cycle of sacrifice and betrayal that spanned centuries. As the battle raged on, Maya could see the full scope of the Zuhar's cunning. The traitor's betrayal had planted seeds of doubt in the hearts of Earth's warriors, shaking their resolve. What remained of the champion's forces began to falter, their morale crumbling under the weight of an insidious threat, humanity's own kind turning against them. But Maya wouldn't let this be the end. She wasn't the first to bear the mantle of the eternal champion, but she would be the last. She refused to let Earth fall into this cycle of destruction. With the sword in her hand, she sprinted into the fray, determined to confront the traitor and end the betrayal once and for all. There could be no turning back. Time was running out, and only by facing the darkness within could she hope to stop the Zuhar and preserve humanity's future. And as she charged forward, she felt the faintest whisper of a presence, as though 1,000 voices were urging her on. The eternal champion was not just a legend. Maya was living proof of that. The clash of steel on alien armor reverberated through the air as Maya's blade cut through the chaos of the battlefield. The traitor, who had once been one of humanity's greatest warriors, now stood at the head of the Zuhar forces, his eyes cold and unyielding. He moved with unnatural precision, directing the enemy with the same calm efficiency that had once been reserved for leading humanity's resistance. Maya charged toward him, the energy of the relic pulsing faintly in her chest, driving her forward. Her heart raced, a combination of fury and determination flooding her veins. She would not allow him to bring Earth to the brink of extinction. The moment she drew near, the traitor raised his hand, and the Zuhar forces shifted. Their ranks parted, giving him a clear path to confront her. The battlefield fell silent for a moment, as if the universe itself were holding its breath. "Maya Voss," he said, his voice carrying over the din of the battle. "The eternal champion returns, but do you truly believe you can save this world? Do you think humanity is worth saving?" Maya gripped her sword tighter. "I don't need to save this world alone," she said, her voice strong despite the knot in her throat. "I fight for the future of every person who believes in the light, who still stands against the darkness you've become." The traitor's lips twisted into a cruel smile. "You still don't understand. The Zuhar aren't just invaders. They are the end of time itself, the harbingers of an inevitable collapse. We can't fight them. No one can. The only way to survive is to embrace what they offer." He raised his hand again, and the sky darkened, as if the very fabric of the atmosphere was being pulled into a singularity. From his outstretched fingers, a burst of energy shot toward Maya, faster than anything she could have anticipated. It was a temporal strike, an attack that warped the flow of time itself. The world around her blurred, and for a moment, she was trapped in an endless loop, unable to escape the collapsing reality. Her body felt heavy, her movements sluggish, as if the very passage of time were being manipulated against her. For a moment, she thought she would lose herself to it, trapped in a place where nothing made sense. But then, through the distortion, she heard a voice. Faint, like an echo through a canyon, but unmistakable. "You are the champion. Fight, and time will bend to you." The relic in her hand pulsed again, and with a surge of strength, Maya broke free from the time-warping grip. Her vision cleared, the world snapping back into place as if the universe itself had been rewound. The Zuhar agent, the traitor, staggered back, his smug expression faltering for the first time. You can't. You shouldn't be able to do that," he stammered, his hands shaking. Maya's eyes narrowed as she stepped forward. "You've forgotten something. Time doesn't control me. I control it." With a swift motion, she closed the gap between them. Her blade flashed in the dim light, cutting through the air with a speed and precision that surprised even her. The traitor barely had time to react before she struck, her sword finding its mark. His armor cracked beneath the force of the blow, and his body jerked as the energy from the relic coursed through him, unraveling the time distortion he had woven. The traitor crumpled to the ground, gasping for breath. His eyes, once filled with cold certainty, now reflected a deep fear. You are the true champion." Maya stood over him, her breath heavy, her hands trembling from the weight of the moment. She had won the battle, but she knew this victory was only a small part of the greater war that lay ahead. The Zuhar were not easily defeated, and they were still coming. But she could feel the power of the eternal champion flowing through her, a legacy that spanned centuries, from one iteration to the next. As the Zuhar forces faltered, the remnants of humanity's soldiers rallied, emboldened by the fall of the traitor. But Maya knew that this was not the end of the fight. It was just the beginning. The traitor had been only one piece in a larger puzzle, and now the true challenge awaited. She turned to the warrior who had guided her through the battle, his expression grim. "This isn't over, is it?" she asked. He shook his head. "No. The Zuhar have a deeper plan, one that spans more than just this battle. They have twisted the fabric of time itself, and their influence is spreading." Maya looked out across the battlefield, the remnants of the Zuhar forces regrouping. The future was uncertain, but she would not stand down. She had been chosen to protect humanity, and no matter the cost, she would fight to preserve it. "We will end this," Maya declared, her voice resolute. Once and for all. The warrior nodded. The eternal champion's legacy lives on in you, Captain. Now, we must take the fight to the heart of the Zuhar. The true war begins now. With renewed purpose, Maya turned her gaze to the horizon, where the final battle for Earth's future awaited. The pride of humanity was a shadow of its former self, a battered hulk drifting in the cold expanse of space. Maya stood on its bridge, watching the fractured remnants of Earth's resistance rally around her. The battle they had fought on the ground had won them a brief respite, but they were far from safe. The Zuhar were relentless, their influence spreading far beyond the confines of the planet. Now they needed to take the war directly to their enemy's heart. Maya's mind raced as she surveyed the tactical maps. The Zuhar had established a stronghold in a distant corner of the galaxy, an ancient, twisted structure built into a dead star system. It was a place of unspeakable power, and it was where the Zuhar's true leader, the Overlord, resided. He was the architect of Earth's fall, the force behind the invasion, and the one who had corrupted humanity's greatest champion into a pawn for their cause. "We have our target," Maya said, turning toward her senior officers. "The Overlord is in that system. We'll hit them there, at the source." Lieutenant Alexei, her first officer, looked at her with a mixture of concern and admiration. "Captain, that system is a graveyard. No one has returned from an assault on the Zuhar's stronghold. We have no idea what we'll face." Maya's gaze hardened. "We don't have a choice. This is the final push. If we don't take them down now, Earth's future is lost." The crew fell silent. No one questioned her resolve. They had seen firsthand what the Zuhar were capable of, and they trusted her. But Maya knew the risks. Every officer on board the Pride of Humanity had seen loved ones lost to the alien scourge. Every soldier on this ship carried the weight of that loss. "We'll make it," Maya said, more to herself than anyone else. "I know this might feel like a suicide mission, but there's something we can't afford to ignore. We fought too hard, too long. Humanity has survived through every trial. Now we need to bring the fight to them." She glanced at the relic, still on the bridge, glowing faintly with a quiet power. It had guided her this far. She wasn't certain what it had shown her, what had called to her, but she could feel its ancient energy surging within her. It was as if time itself had bent to her will. And she knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that she had been chosen for this battle. Her destiny was linked to this war in ways she still couldn't fully comprehend. "Ready the fleet," Maya commanded, her voice unwavering. "Set course for the Zuhar stronghold. It's time to end this." The crew sprang into action. The Pride of Humanity and its remaining ships jumped into hyperspace, their destination set on a collision course with the heart of the Zuhar's empire. As the stars blurred into streaks of light around them, Maya stood at the helm, her mind focused on what lay ahead. The journey to the heart of darkness was not an easy one. As they approached the dead star system, the atmosphere aboard the Pride grew tense. Long-range scans revealed a complex network of Zuhar defense platforms, orbiting the system's desolate planets like vultures circling a carcass. But it wasn't the ships or the weapons that worried Maya. It was the feeling deep within her, the unease that had been creeping up ever since she first heard the voice of the relic. There was something ancient about this place, something beyond the Zuhar's technology. Something dark. "This place doesn't feel right," Alexei muttered, his voice grim. "It's like they've been expecting us." "They have," Maya said, her voice quiet but resolute. "The Overlord has been watching. We were always meant to come here." The ship's AI pinged with an incoming transmission, cutting through the tension in the air. It was a direct line from the Zuhar's stronghold. A distorted voice crackled through the comms, sending a chill down Maya's spine. "You've come far, human," the voice said, its tone smooth but dripping with malice. "I've been waiting for you, just as I've waited for all the others. The eternal champion, always reborn, always so foolish." Maya's grip tightened on the armrest of her chair. "Who are you?" The voice laughed, a hollow, chilling sound. I am the Overlord, the one who shapes the future. You've walked the path laid out for you, Maya Voss. The relic chose you, but you are nothing more than a pawn. Your victory here is only another step in my plan." The comms cut off abruptly, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Maya turned to her officers. "Prepare for battle. The Overlord thinks he's won. Let's show him how wrong he is." As they entered the dead star system, the pride of humanity and its fleet of survivors faced the heart of the Zohar's power. But Maya could feel the weight of her destiny pushing her forward. This wasn't just a battle for Earth's future. It was the final confrontation between light and darkness, and she would be the one to tip the scales. The pride of humanity shuddered as it plunged deeper into the heart of the Zohar stronghold, its engines straining against the immense gravity well of the dead star system. The distant stars blinked like cold, uncaring eyes, their light swallowed by the dark expanse that surrounded them. Maya stood at the helm, her gaze fixed on the looming structure ahead. A vast, twisted monolith floating in the void, surrounded by an impenetrable field of debris and Zohar ships. "They're ready for us," Alexei said, his voice tight as he scanned the enemy formations. "Defensive grids are online. The Overlord knows we're here." Maya nodded, her jaw clenched. The Zohar had anticipated their every move, as if they had already mapped out every possible outcome of this battle. It was clear now that they were not just fighting an alien force. They were fighting a being that had learned how to bend the very threads of time itself. "It's not just about the ships, Alexei," Maya said, her voice steady despite the storm of thoughts churning in her mind. "We've been drawn here for a reason. The Overlord wants us to fight him, but he doesn't just want to destroy us. He wants to break the cycle." "The cycle?" Alexei repeated, his brow furrowing. Maya turned to face him, her eyes flashing with the weight of the revelation. "The relic, it's not just an artifact. It's a part of something bigger, something the Overlord has been trying to control for centuries. The Zohar have been manipulating time, creating a twisted loop where humanity rises and falls, and the eternal champion is reborn to fight them over and over again. But every time, they grow stronger, while we are left with fewer survivors." Alexei's eyes widened as the implications sank in. "You mean, this has happened before, over and over?" "Yes," Maya said, her voice unwavering. "We're not the first to stand here, Alexei. Every champion before me has faced this same battle, but they were never able to break the cycle. The Overlord's power is rooted in time itself. He's been manipulating it, bending it to his will. Every victory, every loss, feeds his strength." The bridge fell silent as the crew absorbed her words. The realization was staggering. The war they thought they were fighting was just a single thread in a much larger, much older tapestry. The Zohar had not only invaded Earth's colonies, they had rewound time and used humanity's own champions to perpetuate an endless struggle. "We have to break it," Maya said, her resolve solidifying. "If we don't stop the Overlord now, this cycle will never end. But we're not going to do it alone. The relic chose me. And I know now that it's not just for this battle. It's for the end of the cycle." "Captain, we're receiving a transmission," the communications officer called out, breaking the tense silence. Maya's heart skipped a beat as the familiar, distorted voice of the Overlord crackled through the comms once again. "You think you can break free from time's grip, human?" The Overlord's voice boomed, his tone dripping with amusement. "How quaint. You are but a flicker in the grand scheme of eternity. No matter how many times you are reborn, no matter how many times you rise against us, you will never defeat me. Time bends to my will." Maya stepped forward, her gaze burning with defiance. "You don't control time, Overlord. You only think you do. We are not your pawns anymore. This cycle ends today." There was a pause, and then the Overlord's voice responded, laced with cold malice. "We shall see, Captain. Prepare yourselves. Your end is near." The transmission cut off, and the ship's hull reverberated with the sound of enemy fire. The first wave of Zihar ships had engaged, their weapons tearing through space with deadly precision. Maya's eyes never left the screen as explosions blossomed in the distance. The enemy was closing in. "Shields up," Maya commanded, her voice firm. "Engage evasive maneuvers. All ships, focus fire on the Zihar carriers. We can't afford to let them regroup." The battle raged on, and Maya's heart raced in her chest. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Every action, every decision, could mean the difference between victory and defeat, not just for Earth, but for the entire cycle. She was the last of the eternal champions, and this was her final chance to break free from the Overlord's grasp. But as the pride of humanity continued its assault, something shifted within the fabric of the battlefield. A strange, unexplainable energy surged through the ships, distorting the path of the missiles and weapons fire. The Zihar ships were freezing mid-maneuver, their systems glitching, their once perfect coordination breaking down. Maya's eyes widened. "What's happening?" "It's the relic," Alexei said, his voice filled with awe. "It's affecting the time fabric. It's rewriting the rules. The Overlord's control is slipping." Maya's pulse quickened. The relic had awakened. It wasn't just an artifact. It was a force of nature, a power that had been lying dormant, waiting for her to wield it. The Overlord's grip on time was weakening, but the true test was just beginning. "Keep pushing forward," Maya said, her voice steady with purpose. "We've only just begun." As the battle intensified around them, Maya realized the truth. She wasn't just the eternal champion in name. She was the key to ending the cycle, the one who could turn the tide of fate itself. And now, with the relic at her side, she would rewrite the future. The Overlord's reign over time was coming to an end, and the fight for humanity's future was far from over. The Zihar forces were no longer the well-oiled machine they had once been. Their ships, once synchronized with deadly precision, now fought with erratic disarray. Their advanced technologies faltered, their movements stuttered. Something had changed. Maya could feel it, a subtle shift in the very air of the battlefield. The relic's power was unraveling the Overlord's control, piece by piece. "We've got them on the back foot," Alexei said, his voice sharp with a mix of excitement and disbelief. "Their ships are losing cohesion. It's like their systems are destabilizing." Maya's eyes scanned the tactical display as Zihar ships began to drift out of formation, their once precise attacks now scattered and uncoordinated. A few of them attempted to break away and flee, but their communications were failing, leaving them isolated and vulnerable. The fleet of survivors pushed forward, pressing the advantage, but Maya knew the Overlord would not fall so easily. He was no ordinary adversary, and this battle was far from over. "Captain, we've intercepted another transmission from the Overlord," the communications officer reported. Maya's heart tightened. She'd known the Overlord wouldn't take his defeat lying down. "Patch it through," Maya ordered, her voice cold. The Overlord's voice echoed through the bridge, but this time there was an unmistakable tremor of anger in his words. "You think this is a victory, Captain Maya Voss? Do you believe you've broken free from my grasp?" The bridge fell silent as Maya's hands tightened into fists at her sides. "You've only scratched the surface of what's to come," the Overlord continued, his voice laced with venom. "You cannot defeat me. No one ever has, and no one ever will. The relic you wield is nothing but a fragment of a greater force, one that I control. You may have caused some minor disruptions, but in the end, I will always bend time to my will. You are just another fleeting moment in the vast eternity I have crafted." Maya stood tall, her gaze unwavering. The Overlord's words were meant to unnerve her, but they only fueled her resolve. She knew the truth now. This wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a battle for freedom from a cycle that had plagued humanity for eons. "The cycle ends today, Overlord," Maya said, her voice cutting through the static. "This time, I will be the one to break it." The Overlord's laughter came through, chilling and hollow. "You think you are different? You are just a puppet, a part of my game. The relic you hold, your so-called weapon of power, it is nothing compared to the forces I command. You cannot defeat me. Not in this time, nor in any other. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving Maya in silence, her thoughts racing. She knew the Overlord's arrogance was his greatest weakness, and it would be his undoing. He had underestimated the power of human will, of the relentless drive that had carried Earth's champions through centuries of darkness. The Overlord might control time, but Maya controlled her fate. "Status report," she commanded. "The Zuhar are retreating, Captain," Alexei said. "They're scattered. Their carriers are trying to regroup, but their coordination is failing. This is our moment." Maya nodded, her expression hardening with determination. "All ships prepare to assault the Zuhar stronghold. This is the final push. We end this now." As the fleet surged toward the Overlord's monolithic fortress, Maya felt the weight of her decision pressing on her shoulders. This wasn't just about stopping an alien invasion. It was about breaking the chains of time that had kept humanity trapped in an endless cycle of loss and rebirth. She wasn't just fighting for Earth's survival. She was fighting for its freedom. The relic had given her the power to rewrite the future, but she had to act now before the Overlord's grip on time strengthened again. The pride of humanity and its fleet of survivors moved with purpose, cutting through the remnants of the Zuhar's defenses like a blade through soft flesh. The enemy was scrambling, disorganized, but still dangerous. Maya's eyes never left the massive structure ahead, an ancient, twisted monument to the Zuhar's power and their control over time. The Overlord's presence loomed within, like a dark cloud hanging over the battlefield. She knew that the final confrontation would be in the heart of that fortress. As they neared the Zuhar stronghold, Maya activated the relic. The blade pulsed with light, its energy surging outward, bending space around it. She could feel the time-distorting power of the relic clashing with the Overlord's influence, a battle of wills that was now playing out on a cosmic scale. "This is it," Maya whispered to herself, her voice resolute. "The Overlord's reign ends here." The ship shuddered again as they entered the gravitational field of the stronghold. The Zuhar were not going to let them reach the heart of the fortress without a fight. Defensive lasers rained down on the pride of humanity, and the fleet's ships returned fire with deadly accuracy. "We're taking heavy damage," Alexei called out, his voice strained. "Shields are holding, but we won't last long in this fire." Maya's heart pounded, but she remained focused. "Keep pushing forward," she said, her voice calm but filled with an unshakable resolve. "We're not turning back. The future of humanity depends on us." As the pride of humanity broke through the final defensive layer, Maya braced herself for the battle that would decide the fate of all time. The Overlord would not go down easily, but neither would she. This was the end of the cycle, and Maya would be the one to break it once and for all. The pride of humanity tore through the last wave of Zuhar defenses, their ships disintegrating in flashes of light as the fleet pressed forward. Maya could feel the intensity of the battle building inside her, the pulse of the relic in her hand sensing with the rhythm of her own heartbeat. The dark fortress loomed ahead, its jagged alien architecture rising like a twisted mountain against the black void of space. It was the heart of the Overlord's power, the place where his influence over time was strongest, and Maya knew that to defeat him, she would have to confront him at its core. "Shields are holding, Captain," Alexei reported, his voice tight. "We've made it through the outer defenses. We're almost there." Maya nodded, her gaze fixed ahead. Every fiber of her being was focused on the path ahead. The final confrontation was at hand, and there was no turning back. The Overlord's voice still echoed in her mind, taunting her, mocking her belief in the power of humanity. He had manipulated time for centuries, shaping the fate of entire civilizations, but Maya knew one thing for certain. He had never faced a force like her. The fleet maneuvered into position, each ship surrounding the fortress, its dark, twisted spires reaching up like claws ready to tear through the stars themselves. Maya's mind raced as she prepared for what was to come. The Overlord would not surrender easily, and whatever twisted power he wielded, he would use it to the fullest. Suddenly, the communication system crackled to life, a familiar, haunting voice cutting through the static. "So you've made it this far." The Overlord's voice reverberated across the ship's speakers. "I have watched you, Captain Maya Voss. You are the culmination of every champion who has ever risen against me. But just like them, you will fall." Maya's grip tightened on the relic, feeling the surge of its energy in response. The Overlord had always underestimated humanity's resolve. He had believed that no matter how many times they fought, no matter how many times they were reborn, they would always fall in the end. But he was wrong. This time, humanity would not be his puppet. "You're wrong," Maya said, her voice firm. "You've twisted time to your will, but you've never understood the true strength of humanity. We don't just fight to survive. We fight for a future, for freedom. And this cycle ends now." The Overlord's laughter echoed through the comms, dark and malicious. "You think you can end it? You cannot escape what is destined, Maya Voss. I am the master of time, and you are but a fleeting moment. Your rebellion is nothing but a speck in the vastness of eternity." Before Maya could respond, the ship lurched violently. A surge of dark energy ripped through space, tearing at the fabric of reality itself. The Overlord was using his control over time to distort the battlefield, pulling them into an endless loop of chaos. Temporal fractures opened in the void, shifting reality, blurring the line between the present and the past. The pride of humanity shuddered again as the time distortions began to pull at its hull. Maya's vision flickered, flashes of alternate realities dancing before her eyes, alternate versions of herself, versions where she had failed, where Earth had fallen, where humanity had been lost forever. The weight of all those futures pressed against her mind, threatening to break her resolve. But she fought it. She gripped the relic tightly, feeling its ancient power flow through her. The relic was not just a weapon, it was the key. The key to breaking the cycle. Maya could sense the Overlord's grip on time weakening as the relic's power resonated against it, a clash of wills that sent ripples through the very fabric of existence. With a shout, Maya activated the relic, unleashing its full potential. A burst of pure, unfiltered energy shot out from the blade, piercing through the temporal fractures that had twisted the battlefield. The Overlord's control over time began to crumble as the relic rewrote the rules of the universe itself. Maya's vision cleared, the distortions vanishing like smoke in the wind. The pride of humanity tore through the heart of the dark fortress, its weapons unleashing a final barrage of fire at the Overlord's stronghold. The massive structure shuddered as explosions rippled through its core, the very walls beginning to crumble under the pressure. Maya knew it wasn't enough to just destroy the fortress. The Overlord's influence over time had to be severed completely. The relic's energy surged once again, this time focusing on the core of the fortress, where the Overlord's power was concentrated. Maya could feel the presence of the Overlord, his form shifting and distorting within the dark heart of the stronghold. His voice echoed in her mind, filled with rage and desperation. "You cannot stop me, Maya Voss. I have controlled time for eons. You are nothing." But Maya didn't flinch. She was not the same as the champions who had come before her. She was the one who had learned to defy fate, to carve her own path in the cosmos. She had been chosen not just to fight, but to break the cycle. With a final, decisive strike, Maya plunged the relic into the heart of the Overlord's power. The energy of the blade surged through the fortress, breaking the chains of time that had bound humanity for centuries. The fortress trembled, and the dark presence of the Overlord began to fade, consumed by the raw power of the relic. The cycle was broken. For the first time in eons, the future was free. The battle was over. As the pride of humanity and its fleet hovered over the crumbling remains of the Zuhar stronghold, Maya stood at the bridge, the relic still glowing faintly in her hand. The stars above her seemed brighter, the darkness of the universe no longer pressing in. Humanity had won. But Maya knew that this victory wasn't just hers. It was the victory of every soul who had fought, fallen, and risen again. It was the victory of Earth, and the victory of all those who refused to accept the fate the Overlord had tried to impose. And as the first light of a new dawn bathed the wreckage of the Zuhar Empire, Maya Voss knew that humanity's future had finally been secured for all eternity.